Listening to Spirit Radio, The Paranormal Experience, with your hosts Willie Hassel and Lynn Nickerson on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Good evening and welcome once again to Spirit Radio, The Paranormal Experience. I am your host, Willie Hassel, your gatekeeper to the dark side, your guide to the realm of the unknown, the unseen, the unthinkable. And hey, she is the always lovely, she is the mystical, she is the mysterious. And she is Lynn Nickerson, author of the new book, Gateway to the Paranormal.
Good evening, Willie. Thank you for the plug, and how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good.
All right, excellent.
I really don't want to talk about the weather again.
I don't want to talk about
let's
the weather
just
either. So
forget it exists.
So why don't we just go right to our guest?
Okay, that's good.
Okay. So tonight on Spirit Radio, The Paranormal Experience, it is our pleasure to welcome to the show Joshua Shapiro. Joshua has been involved with the crystal skulls since 1983 when he saw one in Northern California. Since then, he has devoted his life to researching and sharing his information around the world. Along with Katrina Head, they have been offering various crystal skull presentations to the public, as well as a unique style of private consultations with their personal skulls that combines their individual spiritual and creative talents. So let us welcome now to Spirit Radio, Joshua Shapiro. Good evening, Joshua. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, talking about my favorite subject.
Subject, huh? We're happy to have you on. And maybe next time Katrina can join us. That would be nice.
Okay, great.
So why don't we start at the beginning? I suppose that's a good place. What I'd like to know is how you managed to get involved in this study and the exploring of the significance of the skulls.
Okay, well, it wasn't my intention when I first started, which was in my 20s, as I became aware of spiritual matters and started to have experience and so on, that I expected that the crystal skulls would play such a significant role in my life. But basically what happened was, in this period of time, which was in the early 1980s, I was kind of traveling on faith around the country, and actually the travels that I did eventually created my first book, which is called Journeys of an Aquarian Age Networker. But as I was doing this, I didn't really have contact with the crystal skulls. But, I heard from many people about quartz crystal and the power of the quartz crystal and everything, and there was a little bit of information in this first book about it. But anyway, the key is that I had a friend, I was in the San Francisco area. She had a metaphysical bookstore in San Jose, California. So I went to visit her, and I showed her, my book, and she was interested and had copies. And, I remember there was like a copy of my book was showing in her store window. But when I went back one time in 1983, I believe it was in April, visiting with her to see if maybe she might want some more copies of the book, she pulled out a picture of a crystal skull that I never knew was existed, because basically in the 1980s there was 3 crystal skulls, I think, that were known. One was in the Museum of Mankind in England, one was in a museum in Paris, and then of course there was the famous Mitchell Hedges crystal skull that had come out in the 1920s. But she put out a picture of a crystal skull that was made out of amethyst. And being an Aries person, of course, anything that's new and interesting and unusual
You're
is
curious.
going to draw my attention. So, but the key is as I was looking at this picture, so I call this day one of being a crystal skull explorer. So this is April 1983. I started to feel a strong vibration. I call it like an inner earthquake inside of myself. And there was like some communication that was going on with an intelligence or soul memories. You know, it was just like happening really fast. And my sensing is that this crystal skull represented something important. Then, shortly after, I looked at the picture and had what I call my inner earthquake. Then there was a real earthquake that happened in Colingus, California. I was in San Jose, California at this bookstore. And the picture was vibrating on the table. So there was an inner and an outer earthquake that took place.
Wow.
And what I believe happens to all of us is that we have key moments in our life where we have an activation where something that we're here to do or something that we're here to learn about shows up. So this is my day one moment of being a crystal skull explorer. And what I came away from this, and I think it was a communication, telepathic communication from an intelligence that's connected with the crystal skull. The message was, we are returning and we're going to help humanity to create world peace.
Wow.
So after having this experience and trying to, grasp what it was about, then I remember I visited the store again and I brought a bunch of people so they could see the picture of this crystal skull. But then the owner told me a couple weeks later, she said, we know the people who have this crystal skull. It's a group of businessmen, and they have the skull in a vault in an art gallery. And they're thinking to sell it, and there's a wealthy young man in town, so we're inviting you to come so you can see this crystal skull. So I thought, yeah, I want to do that, because if I'm having this powerful experience just looking at a picture of it, imagine what might happen to me when I actually see it in its presence.
Yeah.
So I was invited to this meeting, and then they went into the vault, they took it out, they had it in some kind of a case, put it on this table, and this supposedly wealthy guy was there, and I was staying with a friend in San Jose, so she came with me. So I don't know, maybe there was about 6 or 7 people there. And eventually they said, okay, if you want to touch the crystal skull, you can do it. So I took my right hand and touched the top part of it, and I felt like energy going from the skull through my hand up into my arm and up to my right shoulder. And after I had that experience, I started to sense, and I still sense it today when I think about this crystal skull, because this is what the skulls do to me as I meet them, is they position themselves in my mind's eye, like in a position around my body. So this skull floats over my right shoulder. And I recall a couple weeks even after that, I was doing a presentation, and of course I was given a picture of the skull, and I talked about it. And a person who was a sensitive at that presentation saw a skull floating over my right shoulder.
Oh, interesting.
That's very interesting.
So that was the beginning. So, I just thought, well, I'm an Aquarian Age networker. I'm sharing information. So obviously I'm supposed to share with people about this crystal skull. So little did I know that I would be here, like 35 years later, being very connected, having seen who knows how many crystal skulls at this point in time. And, constantly thinking about different ways to share information with people, from books to public presentations. I even have a crystal skull theme song I've written, organizing conferences. First novel is about to come out very soon that has crystal skulls in it. So every different way that I know how. But basically, the key thing from this beginning experience was the message. And by the way, this amethyst skull now has a name. It's called Ami, which was the name given by one of its guardians before he passed away. And so I think that basically what was happening is, I made a promise in some other lifetime or when I was on the other side that I would do everything I could to help, because for me, the crystal skull, when I saw that crystal skull, it represented to me absolutely, positively, without any doubt whatsoever, that we will see peace in our future. And these crystal skulls, which the indigenous people consider to be sacred artifacts, are a very important part of helping to create that time of peace. So this is, when you have all this going on with you, and it changes you, and it's important, and you have to share it with other people. And as a teacher, what I always do is I share the information and the message, and I release it. And for whoever it's meant to be for, it is, because I know crystal skulls are very controversial, and many of the experiences that I've had with them, if I tell them to some people, they'll say, you're either a great fantasy writer or a science fiction writer, or you know how to come up with a good tale. But I just tell people what the experiences are. So that's how I got started.
Okay, so Joshua, when you touched the amethyst skull, was it sort of a buzzing sensation that you got?
No, I wouldn't call it a buzzing. It was just, I don't know, how can I describe it? I'm sensitive to energy. I feel it on my body. There was like I said, it was like an earthquake, a vibration I was feeling when I saw the picture of it, but when I touched it, it was more electric, I would think.
Electric, okay.
I could actually feel energy moving from the skull into my hand, up into my arm, and to my shoulder.
Do you feel it was sort of
once I make a connection with the crystal skull, whether I'm in the presence of it or not, if I think about it, then I can feel, its essence, its presence, what kind of energy that it has.
You start connecting.
So that's just my gift. That's what I use, like when I do my personal sessions. I can feel what it's like to be the person I'm doing the reading for. So therefore, I know fairly quickly what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and then Spirit also talks to me, and then, I'm able to put together a story for them and give whatever message or insights I'm supposed to give from that. So it's kind of, when you have your gifts, you trust them or you don't trust them. Like, if you have an intuition, how many times does a person have an intuition to do something and they do nothing?
Yeah.
It's the same thing like with the story we're coming out with. It was an idea that came to me, like back in 2014. And I was watching it, and it's taken over 3 years for us to get to the point where we'll have a book to tell this story, and I got help, to do it. So it's the same thing with the skulls. They, I guess, share energies, and they also share knowledge and information and insights to people. And the key is just to learn how to trust when you receive these things, and then take the appropriate action based upon what you receive.
Okay, so when you touched the amethyst skull in particular, did you feel that there was some sort of information download that you were receiving?
No, the way I was experiencing it, it was more as if I was in the presence of a living being.
Okay.
Like what we're doing right now, we're having conversation. 3 people here talking about this subject matter. So it was kind of like I was in the presence of a living consciousness, and I was just having experiences based on that. And I'm sure that some of the information I received was telepathic, or it either was telepathic from the skull, or the energy of the skull was activating something inside of me to remember, what the crystal skulls are and why they're important and so on. Because there's no doubt in my mind after all these years that I've had many different lifetimes where I've worked with them.
Wow.
So usually what happens for most people is there's like one key crystal skull that they'll meet, and all of a sudden things start changing and they start remembering stuff. So for me, Ami was the catalyst to activate this. And then, of course, as I met other crystal skulls, then more knowledge and information, soul memories, understanding came. But I really saw it more as like I was talking to a living consciousness, like a person.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. I'm interested in the mechanics of it, and if you felt that it was as though the skull was embodying a personality. Or was it transmitting only, like a conductor?
Yeah, but it's not just this one. I mean, like right here in the room where I'm talking to you are sitting on the table what I call our crystal children. Many of the crystal skulls who have come to us and asked us to be their guardians because they recognize our dedication to it. Each one has its own personality or living consciousness. So it's just that the amethyst skull was the first one that I had a chance, to have this kind of communication with. And every other skull I met, I would see the same thing, that even though it was completely different, a different energy, different personality, different service to give to the people they had contact with, it was like there was an intelligence. Now, somebody's whispering to me to say this to your listeners. Within everything that exists is an intelligence. I mean, even if you hold an inanimate object like a stone or something, from the earth, not plants per se, because they definitely have an intelligence, but what we would consider an inanimate object, there is an intelligence that's inside of everything.
A consciousness.
And of course, the reason for that is because nothing can exist without the presence of Creator in everything.
Yes.
In other words, we're all particles in the body of Creator. So for whatever reason, maybe it's because the skulls look like us, it's like our bone skull, like a person. On some level, it was decided that one of the ways to help humanity to awaken to our spiritual nature and divine presence that's inside was these crystal skulls became tools that contain energy and wisdom and knowledge and this living consciousness. And each person, you could have one crystal skull, and you could watch what's going on with people, and everybody around it could have a totally different experience with it. But there is something about this living consciousness, which is what I've come away from after all these years. I mean, even as I look at my crystal children here, I smile because I know each one's personality and how they work and what interaction I've had. And, some of them, sometimes I feel in our world peace meditations, I need to pick up and work with them. And I've also watched in our sessions, because people pick which of these skulls they want to hold during the session.
Yeah.
I just watch, well, that's interesting. That person chose this particular skull, and this skull has that kind of energy. So,
Joshua, what about something other than a shape? Other than a shape of a skull, for example, like a crystal ball. You did mention a crystal ball that you had come in contact with. Why would it be that you might not be drawn to the crystal ball as a communicating device rather than a skull form?
Well, what I believe is when it's in the shape of the skull, even including our own bone skull, there was a higher intelligence that decided the form of what humanity would take. And actually, if you follow the context that people are having with even extraterrestrial beings, the most common form that most extraterrestrials have is humanoid, even if they don't look like us. They look totally different. Humanoid. But they usually have 2 legs, 2 arms, a head, a bone skull. So what I think is that the shape of the skull allows every single human being to have access to the total knowledge and wisdom of the universe. It's the shape.
Wow.
It's just like a pyramid.
Yeah.
You go 1/3 of the way down in a pyramid. It rejuvenates metal, and there's something special about being at that place in the pyramid due to its shape. So I think it's the same thing with principle. The shape of the human bone skull, that it allows one to have access to universal knowledge and information, maybe even if it's coming in on a subconscious level. So if someone is going to take quartz crystal, which already is a transmitter and receiver of all kinds of different frequencies of energies, and put that into the shape of like the skull like we have, then I think what happens, it makes it easier for these living consciousness or spirits to work through, to have a contact with us, and it's like we're looking at a person. It just makes it easier. Of course, there's a lot of people who, when they see the crystal skulls, because some of them look like bone skulls, they run for the hills because we've been taught only the skull shape is death, doom, and evil. The rest of the body's okay, but the skull shape, it's evil. And so when people see pictures of it or see a crystal skull, they think that that's what it's about. But when you talk to the indigenous people who honor the crystal skulls as sacred and so on, you realize that this shape and this form is very important for the evolution of humanity. So I think that this is part of the reason why it's in this shape. Now, related to the crystal ball that you're asking me about, you're really talking about Dr. Brown's crystal ball that he claims that he found in a Atlantean temple. I think it was like in the Caribbean islands or somewhere around there, where he was scuba diving, and there was a storm, and what happened is it revealed things that were covered up on the bottom of the ocean, and he found this Atlantean temple, and he went into a room, and there were some, I think, golden hands holding this crystal ball.
Wow.
And he took it so he could prove that he was somewhere, and a voice said, take it and never come back. I had the chance to hold that crystal ball, and my experience with it was that it worked more like a computer than a living consciousness. In other words, energetically it linked into me, and it started showing me like visions and everything.
Really?
But I didn't get the sense that I was dealing with a living being or consciousness. It was more like a computer program. You know, like even on our computers, it asks you a question, and based on your answer, then it shows you the next thing and takes you through a series of steps because it's been programmed to do it. My sensing was there was a very advanced civilization that was involved in this ball that programmed it, but it wasn't the same as I've seen with the skulls. Now, there have been some crystals that are not in the shape of a crystal skull, which definitely have presences around it. So it's not just to say it's the shape of the skull that does it. I think it's the material allows beings in other dimensions who are always around us all the time to be able to communicate with us. But something about the shape of the skull and that we have this inside of ourselves, I just think it makes it easier for us to have communication and kind of understand, what is this thing? It looks like me, and it's talking, it's like a person. So maybe this was just a plan done by higher evolved beings that are interested in seeing humanity, to evolve into a higher state, and the skulls is just a key tool to help us with this.
Well, to help our audience understand, there are 3 categories of skulls, as you're calling, ancient, old, and contemporary. And I'd like you to explain to our audience the difference and the non-difference between the different types of skulls, because I'm sure many think that the contemporary skulls would be insignificant, and they aren't, as you pointed out in the book.
Correct. So basically, there are 4 categories of skulls, but we'll talk about the 3 I talk about in the book, and then I'll tell you about this 4th category that showed up. So what we call a modern or contemporary crystal skull is one that's made by a modern carver who used diamond-tipped tools, because quartz crystal or many of the minerals they're making skulls out of right now, crystal skulls are considered any type of gemstone that somebody's making into a skull shape. So it's not just related to quartz crystals. I mean, again, on the table here we have other gemstones which are made into skulls. So the thing that came up for people is, in the beginning, most people were drawn to what they called the ancient skulls, which would be ones made, who knows, 1,000 years ago, 2,000, 50,000, 100,000. It's really very difficult to be able to do a true dating on these minerals because they're inorganic. We have carbon-14 dating, where archaeologists discover a civilization, and anything that was alive, they can date the decay of the carbon atom and get some feel for it. But all these gemstones are inorganic, so there really isn't a good way to say, well, when was it made? I mean, you can sit with, and I've seen this happen, where you sit with the sensitive, and one sensitive will say, well, it's this, and another sensitive will say something completely different. So I think the most important thing about the skulls is that every single one that exists has the potential to be of service. So coming back to the definition, so we have the modern ones, which of course many carvers now are making them, and you can go on eBay and into stores, and there are many websites, and even on Facebook there's a lot of people who are selling crystal skulls. And obviously there wouldn't be so many people selling them if there weren't many people who wanted to actually have one. The old crystal skull is one that's defined as being made more than 100 years ago, less than 1,000 or 2,000. Those seem to be more primitively done. But the way that I have some sensing about which type of crystal skull I'm in the presence is based on its energy. You know, if it has a very, very high pure energy, then most likely this was made by a very advanced civilization in the past, or was a gift from the gods, which some of the indigenous people talk about, which could be relative to extraterrestrials bringing these as gifts to help humanity. And then the modern ones, people would say, well, they're not significant because, you know, they're brand new, they shouldn't have very much energy. But we've had people who've worked with some of our personal skulls, which definitely are modern made, and have had tremendous experience with it. So what I would say is the modern ones, depending upon who the guardian is, there is the capability of activating them so that they can start to actually have profound effect upon people. And I'm actually looking at one of our skulls, Portal de Luz, which is Portuguese for Portal of Light. This was the first one I received back in 1999. And there was a Mayan elder, very well respected in the world. I'm not going to say his name. I do not wish to embarrass him. But Portal told me that when I met this elder, not to say anything to him, just let him come up to the skull and see whatever he's going to say. And he starts talking in Spanish, which I needed translating. And he's saying this was one of their skulls, and we need to give it back because many of the skulls the Mayans had were stolen by, like, the Spanish.
Oh, sure.
And I tried to explain to the elder, no, I know the carver who made this. This is a modern skull. But see, the thing is the way in which I was working with Portal de Luz and exposing him to some of the very older ancient crystal skulls. And he, you know, had started having a very powerful energy, plus the carver who made him is very talented, and he's a very nice-looking skull, very accurate. So the Mayan priest was fooled because he was reading the skull based on the energy that's connected to it.
Because as we know, they communicate. They communicate, so...
Hello?
Yeah, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Did we lose connection?
No, I don't think so.
However, we are just about at the bottom of the hour, Joshua. Can you, if you want to hold on just a minute? And you're listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. We're talking crystal skulls with Joshua Shapiro, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Supernatural Magazine, one of the UK's top paranormal magazines, provides support to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. It is the magazine's goal to bring every aspect of supernatural news and research from around the world under one roof to create a universal platform for all those interested in the supernatural. More information is available at supernaturalmagazine.com. And you are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And speaking of our friends at Supernatural Magazine, Curia Live presents Borley Rectory and Other Hauntings, February 18th, 2018.
Curia Live will present this event in Bristol, telling the story and research of England's most famous haunted house, the Borley Rectory. This event features speakers such as our friend Steve Parsons, along with Alan Murdy, Ann Winsper, and Christian Hansen Romer.
The event will be live streamed around the world. More information can be found at www.curia.tv/live. Welcome back to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. And tonight we are talking to Joshua Shapiro, talking a little bit about crystal skulls. Welcome back, Joshua.
Welcome back, Joshua.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we were talking about the skulls and how they manage to absorb information from other skulls when they're in close proximity, and that they can communicate amongst themselves. So if you'd explain a little bit like how you place maybe an older skull in the center and then you surround it with some of the crystal babies and what transpires then?
Okay, so what I've observed, and we've actually done some experiments where we could measure energy with meridian stress test system, is we've seen where, let's say, I call it an activated crystal skull. That means one that's already has this living consciousness and it's sending out energy and it's communicating with people. So if you put some around it, let's say that maybe a new carver just made and it's not been touched, no one's worked with it or whatever, what the skulls seem to do, and Portal de Luz told me about this even after I received him, like, the next day when I was sleeping next to him, I woke up and he was telling me that apparently the crystal skulls have what they call an etheric energy network. And every time he talked about that, I would always see that like in the sky somewhere, like above the earth.
Really?
Like each skull, when it awakens, all of a sudden has a place on this network. So one of the greatest things that we sense with our skulls, because we're sensitive to their energy, is that when you put like visiting skulls around them, you can actually feel like they're talking to each other. They're sharing their experiences, their energies, their knowledge, their history very, very quickly. So to test this out, that there really is this kind of sharing going on, when I was in the Chicago area, when I lived in the Chicago area, I had a friend who had this meridian stress test system. And what this does is basically it is able to read the meridian points on the body, which is what acupuncture is about, acupuncture.
Yes.
There's different points on the body where there's these acupressure points, so they use a needle and they're able to measure the energy. And what happens is if 50% of the energy through this rod touching the point goes through, it means that meridian is in perfect balance. And then what happens is if it's on one side, it's like an illness, and another side, it's tension.
Oh.
So what we did is we put we tested people. In other words, we couldn't test the skulls, but we could test people, where we exposed people to 2 brand new skulls that did not have a guardian or owner yet. And really, the test subjects didn't show very much change in their energy from this. And then we put those 2 skulls by Portal de Luz, which is the main skull we were using at the time, and just let them sit there for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we went back and tested the people with the new skulls, and all of a sudden it's like the people were responding to those skulls because they had an energy, uplifted energy or whatever. So this has been our sensing. It's like there's a family consciousness with the skulls. I'm going to say something very profound from this consciousness that I have seen, and there's going to be some people who may not like what I'm about to say, but this is the truth as I've seen it. Between the skulls themselves, it's like they have a perfect harmony. They delight in each other's company. They're very peaceful and harmonious. They say, we wish, this is the message from them, which is a little bit funny, we wish our guardians could learn from us and learn how to live peacefully together instead of arguing over this is the most important skull or this is the way it is or I don't like that person because of what they're sharing. So this is a very interesting comment that it kind of made to me, which just reminds me about how powerful they are and what they're trying to do to help humanity. So that's the best way I can share with you, where I've actually watched like these brand new skulls that have no energy, put them around another one, then we were able to actually do this test. And we actually saw that there was some transference that was going on.
Yeah.
Another story that's interesting It's not directly connected with crystal skulls, but it just shows you what can happen. The skull experiment, which is probably the most powerful experiment that any group has ever done to have contact with spirit manifesting in the physical. They would sit in a circle and they would go into meditation. They had mediums working with them, and they found a very special place in a cellar in an old house in England. So I actually got to go to this place, and we took the crystal skulls with us, because the person who started the circle, he thought maybe the energy of the skulls could help them to reconnect with the spirits, because it was broken. I guess they were doing it from 1993 to 1998, and then all of a sudden the communication stopped. And I've talked to this man, and they've never been able to recreate it. But what I noticed was that why the skulls were in this room where they had all these sessions and where all this manifestation from spirit was going on, objects were porting. Our skulls that were there, they were changed internally by the energy that was in that room. So this is just something I thought that was absolutely amazing, and the skulls seem to take on some new capabilities. So this is another thing that can happen. Anybody who's listening that has a crystal skull, if there's a place you could go to, like a sacred place like Stonehenge or Mount Shasta or Sedona, the skulls will pick up the frequencies of energies in that place, and it will help them to awaken and to be activated as well. And then conversely, I know there's people who go to sacred sites that the energy has been dead for a long time, and will do special ceremony and meditation there with the crystal skulls to reactivate the energies in these sacred places.
Okay, Joshua, what do you suppose the source is of these skulls? Because apparently there is this theory of 13 of them being in existence, and perhaps not all of them have been found, but supposedly they have been planted in various parts across the earth. So who do you think is the mastermind behind this, or their source? Any ideas?
Well, my feeling is that probably a very long time ago, could be Lemuria or Atlantis, that they had some very advanced crystal skulls they were working with in temples. And when those civilizations were destroyed, people who were sensitives that could see the catastrophes coming, and they could also see their future, which is our present now, they knew that these were sacred tools that needed to be protected. And so I think what they did is they hid them. And one of the things that has been coming up a lot of people probably through more soul memory or through, let's say, prophecies or legends, have discussed about that there was a main group of 13 crystal skulls, which I also believe too, but I think that this group of skulls existed long ago, probably in Lemuria, probably in Atlantis, and then when Atlantis was destroyed, different groups. I actually remember taking a blue crystal skull into South America in the area that we now know as Peru, because when I went into Peru, I was having visions of the skull, and I was going to different places. We actually have a book that I published a few years ago where I wrote down every day everything that was going on to me. So it's a record of all these different trips that we took. So I think that what happened is the priests and priestesses who were responsible for taking care of the skulls in Atlantis knew that the future of humanity would come to a point again where they would be accepting of the energy of the skull and would need the skulls to help them in order to bring peace to the planet. So they took them to different places where they would be safe. Probably they were taken care of by different indigenous groups. Although I also think that some of the skulls may have gone, again, this may be something that not everybody's going to agree with, but I know that there are other civilizations that live on this planet under the ground and in the hollow earth, which means the inner surface of the earth, with the earth being hollow. So these very advanced races, descendants of Atlantis, Lemuria, different galactic races that have come here, that live here, that have not directly shown us their presence, although I'm sure our governments already know about them. They also probably held and preserved some of these crystal skulls too, knowing that they were important for the future. So this is very quickly, I mean, this is a very complicated and sophisticated theory. related to the skulls. I mean, one of the Mayans talk about that there's actually 52 skulls, 4 sets of 13, and apparently they had access to one of these sets, which they will not talk to you about them because, you know, they watch the Europeans come into the Americas and just steal everything. So they're sacred, they're protecting them. But the key essence is the interest in the crystal skulls is being brought up, and people are wanting to have them right now because they have a key role to play to bring peace to our planet. And this was the message Ami gave me, which was the first one I saw, and I've never, ever felt differently. I always feel like that's indirectly part of the work that we do to educate people about them. Now, one other thing I think is very important for your listeners to understand is that it's very difficult to understand what is the effect these skulls have if you've never had an experience yourself. So this is why, for many people, I either recommend, if it sounds interesting, either they try to contact people who have crystal skulls that are sharing them with other people like we do, or possibly even to get their own skull. And this is what Katrina basically does, is she helps people who are interested in getting skulls to work with. She's very good at that. So that would be another key thing I think that's important for people to recognize. Have that experience and see what happens to you.
Okay, how about why are so many skulls found in Mexico, and why is it only the hollow ones seem to be found in Mexico?
That's actually not correct. Mexico has a number of hollow skulls that are being found there, and I haven't really heard about other places where they are, but there are more skulls that are not hollow being found in Mexico than there are. So one of the reasons why I think that many crystal skulls, like the first ones that people started talking about, they came out of Mexico, is because when Atlantis was destroyed, I think that they had colonies like in Mexico and America, the Americas and the Caribbean islands and so on. And so they took their sacred objects and they just brought them to their colonies. And what happened over time is they were passed down from person to person, from priests, from shamans, etc. And then when these Mesoamerican civilizations started disappearing and being destroyed, to protect the skulls, they buried them in the ground. Because in Mexico, some people told me that sometimes they would just kick the ground and all of a sudden a crystal skull would literally just roll out of the ground.
So it has to do with
the concept, therefore, is that the Mesoamerican civilizations, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Toltecs, they recognized that these were powerful tools and they were working with them, but during their demise or whatever, then they started burying them in tombs and under the ground and so on. And now they're starting to come out, and, you know, like people were telling me in Mexico when we went there in 2009 that there was a lot of stores that actually had crystal skulls because so many were coming out of the ground. So I think the main reason for this is that they were colonies of Atlantis, and Atlantis crystal skulls were very important. So this would make sense to me. Now, Lemuria, which also went under the water, Lemuria is more connected to like the western part of the United States and the western part of South America. And so there also has been things that have come up around crystal skulls in these areas as well. Like some people who are Inca in Peru have some very interesting skulls that they have found in their ground and in their land. So again, I think that the ones that could be saved were just taken to different parts of the world, and now it's the right time for them to start coming out.
Yeah. Okay, how about this? I wound up purchasing a crystal skull before I even talked to you. I was kind of, I don't know why, but I wanted to have one. It's really small. It fits in the palm of my hand. I really like it. How do you suppose I should activate it? Now, I know you have workshops on this, so I was hoping maybe in principle you could give me an idea.
Sure. Well, the only thing recommendation I can make is just spend a lot of time with it and take it everywhere, because basically what happens when you get a crystal skull, there's a period of time of acclimation where the skull is becoming familiar with you energetically, I would say, and you are starting to become accustomed to the crystal skull. And then what will eventually happen is the skull will give you a name, and it will also start to find a way based upon what are your spiritual gifts. Like my gift is I feel energy and I hear. Like when I'm writing books and things, I swear to God, there's somebody sitting over my shoulder and they're giving me all kinds of amazing things I need to say and a good way how to do it. So it's almost becoming effortlessly. So as you become just accustomed with the skull, in other words, there's not like a set procedure I can give you.
Yeah.
All I know is you spend time and you kind of go with your feeling and intuition what to do, and eventually you'll establish your own communication with the skull as you learn how to trust this. And then you don't need to talk to a person like me. The skull will tell you, hey, Mom, Dad, I want to go out. I want to go by that body of water. Will you take me over there? And it'll just kind of tell you, or then it'll say, you know, I could help you, like Portal de Luz said, Dad, you know, when you're writing, just put me by you, and I'll create a really good energy, because writing takes a lot of energy. I mean, I'm going to be 63 years old, and I remember when I was 20 and 30, I could sit and work the entire day, but these days I can only go, you know, for so many hours. But I remember one time he told me, you know, you're going to be writing this new book, just put me there and I'll help you. So I'll create a good energy for you so the ideas and things that you need to write will flow. So each crystal skull has a way that it can help its guardian, and as you develop the communication with it, and you just learn what's the best way to work with it. But you have to trust what you're receiving inwardly.
I know you do, don't you? Yeah. You can't discredit it, or you should at least acknowledge it and at least write it down. And then you start realizing...
This is an important saying. What's the worst thing that could happen to you if you try something new? Nothing will change.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
What is the best thing that could happen to you if you are willing to go in a new direction and trust what you're getting inside? Everything could change. Is it worth it to do it? I say absolutely. Mm-hmm. So even if you make mistakes, let's say in the beginning, working with the skull, that's excellent. That's great, because you'll just learn what is the proper way to work with your crystal skull. Mm-hmm. Everything teaches us something, so nothing is wasted.
Can you talk a little bit about your trip to Tijuana and Katrina's experience? She experienced a past life experience when she got to, what was it, the second level of one of these temples. So she got some direct information. She had a connection with her past.
Right. I can't answer for Katrina. We wrote that book quite a few years ago, so this will have to be a question you can ask her when she comes on in the future.
How about you?
But as far as what I experienced, this is the place where I had the chance to experience my first pyramid.
Oh.
And the pyramids in this location, there were two, a pyramid of the sun and a pyramid of the moon. They were huge. They were, I do not believe, even with the modern technology we have today,
I know
that
what
we
you're saying.
could duplicate what I saw in these pyramids. The stone that it was made from, I have no idea where this stone came from. It was kind of like a marble effect or something. Mm-hmm. And just as I'm standing on the stones of the pyramid itself, the energy that it was radiating was totally unbelievable. In other words, the sensing I had as I was standing on the pyramid is there was no one in modern times who could have possibly have made this. Yeah. This had to be done by a very advanced spiritual culture or civilization. Now, we know in particular that we find pyramids all over the world. And these pyramids are normally built over energy vortexes because the people who built them were sensitive to this. Plus, I don't think that we have any clue whatsoever of how the pyramids were actually used. And I don't think the Mexican government has any clue either what's inside this pyramid. I definitely
or who built them.
Like there was things that were hidden inside of this pyramid that would blow people away, that these, I don't know, devices, advanced devices, sacred knowledge, whatever was there, would be, you know, for most people, they couldn't believe that there actually was such an advanced civilization that existed on the earth like that.
Because
so that was my sensing. Now, the other thing that happened to me which I still am not totally sure was, I got very sick also while I was in this area. I had a tremendous headache, and I had to rest. I think it could be the energy was so strong and affecting me that it overwhelmed me. The other thing I remember is there was a picture we took when we were on the pyramid, and there seemed to be some kind of a light that showed up, which could have been some type of either UFO or
entity.
I don't know, satellite or observation craft or something, but it wasn't exactly in our dimension, so we couldn't see it, but the camera was sensitive and picked it up as light.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very special experience, one I'll not forget. Of course, the crystal skulls were with us, so you can only imagine what kind of frequencies and energies they were absorbing while we were in this area.
Oh, yeah. And weren't you told by one of the Mayans that the Mayans did not build those temples and they don't know who did?
There's differences of opinions on this. I mean, it's the same thing like when you go to Peru. You see these gigantic stone structures.
They're molded.
With huge blocks that they say the Incas built. But, it's just impossible. They couldn't lift these stones.
Yeah.
I mean, they're tons and tons. So I'm not sure if the Mayans admit this or not, although I know that one group I had contact with from the Mayans said that they had contact with the grandfathers from the Pleiades. So in other words, they're recognizing that their forebears could have possibly been galactic beings from the Pleiades that came to the Earth, which we now know as the Mayans.
Josh, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I did have one other burning question, and that is, when you were doing your meditation with Rosie from that film, I watched it. Now, can I tell you what I thought I saw?
Yes, sure. Go ahead, please.
Well, it looked like a drop of blood was falling from your wrist.
Yes.
That was touching Rosie.
Yes, I saw the same, but I do not remember, nor did I see in my wrist any blood. So I wasn't aware of this at all. I didn't have any pain. There was no open wound.
Yeah.
But there were several other people who saw that and also said the same. It looked like blood was coming from my wrist.
Yep, I'll be darned. So what do you suppose that was? Can you explain it?
The only thing I can think of is, blood is life. Blood is life. So perhaps with the crystal skull, my physical body was honoring it and was giving a part of itself this sacred blood that keeps us alive. So, or it could have been that maybe I was a Mayan. There are people who said they remember me as a Mayan, and maybe I was a priest, and this was just part of the ceremony. So to me, if that happened, it was an honoring of the skull.
Yeah.
It wasn't, done in a negative way whatsoever. It was just to honor the skull that I was working with.
Mm-hmm. And do you suppose that some of those skulls, that rather than being part alien or alien-looking, do you think that they had a resemblance to an ape?
Yes, there are some crystal skulls that will look ape-like.
Okay, yeah.
And some of the very, very old ones, we actually have one crystal skull that came out of, I guess, China that has more of an ape-like appearance than it does a human appearance. So, there are some that look like that.
Okay, well, Josh, we're just about at the end of the show, so if you
about 2 minutes left.
2 more minutes? Okay. So if you'd like to talk about one of your organizations, just a second here, that would be, the World Mystery Group. I don't have it in front of me. That organization, and then your websites and any lectures and about your new book or your film, if that's still on the table.
Okay. No, the film we haven't had any success with. So, so anyway, these are the things that we're involved with. First of all, our website, cse.crystalskullexplorers.com. This is our main website. This is where people can find our free ebook. They can participate in our World Peace meditations that we do on the 13th of every month. They do not need to have a crystal skull to do that. We also have a free newsletter. And then the big thing that's happening right now, probably within a week of the broadcast or less, we will have our first novel coming out. It's called Journeys into the Unknown and Back Again. This is book number 1. It's a trilogy, so it's the first book of the trilogy. It basically is sharing about a married couple who call themselves Crystal Skull Explorers. They're traveling, lecturing, sharing knowledge and information, and all of a sudden they start receiving communications in various ways. They have to go to Peru because Joseph Schwartz, who's the main character, he's being invited to go through a dimensional portal into the other side. So this is essentially what the first book is about. You meet them, and he explains, what he's going to do. But the key to this book is that everything he's going to experience on the other side, instead of just being a memory and a tale he tells, the beings on the other side have figured out how to record everything, so when he comes back, people will be able to experience what he experienced.
Oh,
so
really?
That's the essence of this story. It's the first novel. Thank God my friend Karen in England is a novelist. She helped me to write it. So I basically came up with the story and, helping to edit and make sure that it follows it. Like I said before, on our website, Katrina also helps people to get their own crystal skulls. And I'm trying to think. We don't really have any lectures or anything coming up, but we're always happy to talk to people if they're interested to bring us out into their area to do our presentation, our workshop, our private sessions with our crystal skulls. And for right now, it's just trying to get all these books that we have that we've been doing around the crystal skulls available for people. So this story is really going to touch almost every major category related to the paranormal. They either discuss it in the book or they have experiences around it. So that's how to contact us, get involved in our meditation. Again, it's CSE.crystalskullexplorers.com, or people can email us at crystalskullexplorers@gmail.com.
Thank you for that.
Very good.
And real quickly, 2003 was supposed to be the end of the Peace Day, or that's when peace was supposed to start. Has that date been reset?
2013, you mean?
2013 is what I meant.
Yes. Basically, people didn't read the Mayan Prophecy properly. Basically, what the Mayans understood is the end of a cycle was happening on December 21st, 2012, and we're now in the next cycle. So as far as, world peace coming, I see that happening, but I don't see that totally being fulfilled according to my future self, who's me, and our future maybe till around 2037, 2040.
Okay.
So we still got a ways to go, but I think things are starting to pick up in a very positive light these days. So
Good.
I think more and more light projects are going to be supported than ever before.
Terrific.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to end it there, Joshua, but we thank you very much for joining us.
It's been very
My
interesting.
pleasure.
Thank you so much, Joshua.
And so you have been listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience, and I guess that is it for this week.
And thank you, everyone, for listening, and you have a good evening. You have been listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience, with your hosts Willie Hassel and Lynn Nickerson on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
In this one of many possible worlds, all for the best or some bizarre test. It is what it is, and whatever. Time is still the infinite jest. The arrow flies when you dream. The hours tick away, the cells take away. The watchmaker keeps to his schemes. The hours tick away, they tick away. The measure of a life is a measure of love and respect. So